All right, welcome to the third installment of our War and Peace Quarantine 50 pages a day read through. Today we will be discussing pages 100 through 150. Dimitri, your thoughts?
We're in a completely different world. We are in a world of war, and the writing style hasn't changed, but the storytelling has. It's much more intense. The episodes follow each other much more urgently, and of course, only men now speak or do anything. The women are behind the scenes.
That is correct. So we have moved on to chapter two. They are very long chapters, or book two, I think he calls it, in the serialized sense that these were probably released as separate books because printing giant manuscripts was cost prohibitive back then. So we have moved out of the world of culture and fetes and balls and gossip. And, well, we haven't left the world of gossip, but we have entered the world of war. And it's funny, it's a very similar way he takes us through the world. We see all the different sides of the war world, from the very top, the generals, down to the lowly
Kutuzov.
Kutuzov, all the way to the very top, swinging around to the lowly soldiers, all the way to the front line chaos, to the back room dealings, to the gossiping, infighting amongst the soldiers. So it's actually narratively quite similar to the first chapter and how we sort of fly around all these different worlds and meet all of our main characters and see all of our important themes and locations set up. And yes, let's talk about some of our main characters. Dimitri, you want to talk about our two main gentlemen we'll be following here, which are Andre and Nikolai. The Nikolai being Rostov, and Andre being the son of Bolkonsky, who we just left. Oh, I see we have a network problem.
Sure.
All right, we had a little technical difficulty, but we are back. I was discussing our two main characters being Nikolai Rostov and Andre, the son of Volkonsky, who we left in the country. Tell us about these two characters that we have been now seeing in a new environment.
Nikolai finds himself in the heat of battle after having an unfortunate incident where he correctly accuses someone of theft, but it's seen as bad for morale. And when he's in battle, he's completely confused and ineffective, and that kind of knocks him for a loop. Andre is galloping as a messenger and as an aide de camp to various generals, and I think is acquitting himself quite well. But it's a drawback when he finds out that events overwhelm the Russian army.
Yeah, so Andres has a pretty major character change. When we met him, he was restless and bored and unhappy in his marriage, at least confidentially to other people. And now we find him on fire and in his own skin and feeling full of
Unexpectedly.
confidence. Yeah, and he has war has changed him for the better. He is definitely somebody who is thriving uh, in the schedule and routine and discipline of a regimen and the battle line, which is interesting because as his father's son, this would make sense. This is where his father would thrive, um, and
He's also a writer. He
right.
composes messages, he composes reports, and for him, he is in his element. Maybe kind of like Tolstoy would have been.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Tolstoy definitely. It seems that he would agree with the phrase that the devil is makes work of idle hands, and he definitely seems to think that people do their best when they are busy and have a routine. At least as we're seeing in Andre and his father. Um, I do want to read. So now we do get our first battle sequence. We get a frontline attack were actually met with the Russians retreating. They're retreating a position to the French while burning the bridges behind them after hearing the dire news that the Austrians have lost a major battalion, and are now going to retreat to a safer territory and cede some land to the French. And we get our first chaotic battle sequence. And we also get one of the most famous passages in all of Tolstoy, which I'm going to bring up here, and I think it's worth reading together.
It's almost
Something
like an essay, right? About crossing the boundary. Is that the one?
that one, right? But there's a moment where Nikolai, where we fly into Nikolai's mind in the midst of the battle, and we see what he's thinking. And I'll just read it here. So Nikolai Rostov turned away, and if searching for something, began looking at the distance, at the waters of the Danube, at the sky, at the sun. How good the sky seemed, how blue, calm, and deep, how bright and solemn the setting sun, how tenderly and lustrously glistened the waters of the distant Danube, and better still were the distant blue hills beyond the Danube, the convent, the mysterious gorges, the pine forests bathed in mist to their tops. There was peace, happiness. There's nothing, nothing I would wish for. There's nothing I would wish for if only I were there, thought Rostov. In me alone and in the sun, there is so much happiness. Turning the page somehow. Turn the page. I missed it. Technical difficulties. Here, groans, suffering, fear, and this obscurity, this hurry. Again, they're shouting something, and again, everybody's run back somewhere, and I'm running with them, and here it is, death above me, around me. An instant, and I'll never again see this sun, this water, this gorge. Just then the sun began to hide itself behind the clouds. Ahead of Rostov, another stretcher appeared, and his fear of death and the stretcher, and his love of the sun and life, all merged into one painfully disturbing impression. That moves me and is powerful, and it's almost as if the only time he's ever actually able to see the world as it is in a moment when he could die at any second. And instead of focusing on the whizzing cannon fodder going over his head or his friends dying around him, he focuses on the sky and the hills in the distance and
The monastery with the pretty nuns that were discussed earlier.
Exactly. It's a famous section from Tolstoy, and it's an amazing cinematic moment of you really feel like you're all of a sudden in his POV, and you're on the battlefield, but you're not on the battlefield. But he's going through something transformative and profound and sad and joyful too. This is not a sad moment. This is a moment of longing for the life he hopes to have in 5 minutes or 1 minute from now, and how it will change the way that he relates to the world and time from that moment forward.
Yes, it is a moment in slow motion, in bright technicolor, and you can almost hear the music playing over it when you're reading it. And it's a moment of beauty, and it will snag at you, and it will make you remember it maybe years from now.
Yeah. So we have a battle moment. We have a sort of a comical moment of him catching one of his hussars. A hussar is light cavalry. Think of them as just they're the infantry horse riders. But officers still. They're not the troops. They're not the cannon fodder. But they're not the generals either. They're usually
they have those light curved swords that are very pretty and they flash in the sun.
Yeah. So they're usually sort of the jobs that rich men's sons get. But they do see action as we see. But this is also a moment where Rostov thinks of himself as a coward. He calls himself a coward moments later, and realizes something about himself, that in a moment of actual battle, I mean, we all wonder how will we react in a moment of near death battle, And he has his first moment, and in it he finds himself lacking and feels like he failed. But I'm not sure Tolstoy would agree with that. I think maybe he found his real humanity in that moment and changed for the better. We'll find out. But
Tolstoy saw battle himself a couple of times
yep,
in his 20s, according to the introduction.
he did.
And it really feels that way. It really feels like someone writing from experience who understands these feelings from the inside.
And a lot of things we're seeing right now is about the individual versus the group. And in this battle, we are clearly in the point of view of the individual. And then with Andre, we get a story about the individual versus the group there as well, because Andre does what he morally thinks is right, which is to point out a fellow officer stealing from one of his friends, but realizes that pointing this out will be bad for the group, as it will lower morale and embarrass them and potentially get his friends in trouble, and potentially make them look bad for the as a regiment to the other commanders, because they're coming to be seen and checked on, and you know how glistening their buttons are is going to be checked, and if there's infighting and people pointing each other out as criminals, it's going to look badly upon the whole army. And so he has a moment there, sort of realizing that maybe his individual morality is less important than the group safety at that moment and the group morale, which is also, I think, a theme we're going to be seeing a lot of.
Unit cohesion, as it's
Yep,
often called.
exactly. Dimitri, any overall general thoughts on how you're feeling in the experience?
Maybe colonel thoughts or corporal thoughts, not really general thoughts yet. But this is a section that benefits from rapid reading because there are a lot of characters and names, a lot of situations that are introduced that are new. And as long as you keep going, the novel, as you said, will do the work for you. Um, it will remind you of what you need to remember, and it'll explain what you actually really need to know. And reading it quickly, reading it as if you're watching a movie or a TV show, is the best way on your first read, I think, for me on this
Yeah.
one.
No, there are different ways to read books. The way you read Joyce or the way you read Proust, with a dictionary on your lap and making sure you've understood every sentence is one way to read, but that is not the way you read Tolstoy. And Tolstoy is about letting the impression wash over you and keep moving forward, and knowing that you're not in good hands. You're probably in the best hands that have ever been used to write in the history of humanity, and to feel safe there and to keep moving and go, I don't remember that person. That's fine. You're probably not meant to, unless you
It's
are, and then you'll
actually
know.
it's actually how Chris Nolan described the best way to watch Dunkirk at the screening I went to, where he
Right.
said, like, don't worry, just let it wash over you.
Yeah.
Just you'll get it.
Yeah, and a good artist makes space for you to have your own thoughts and your own experiences and to daydream while still in their work. And I think that's a poignant way to experience art.
Yes.
We will join you again tomorrow with the next 50 pages. Read on Macduff, and we hope you are enjoying. If you are enjoying or have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments on the YouTube, and maybe at some point we'll get some listener involvement as well. Thank you, Dimitri, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Join us. It's a great
Bye.
pleasure. Bye.
Take care, brother. Bye.